Something done is better than something perfect. This is one of the main statements in my codex. I started my path as a solo indie game developer, and I want to tell you the story of how I developed my first game. I see this video more like a set of tips for other young starting devs. So, I am the Polish citizen, and this is how I developed my first mobile game, Recycling 2048. It all started more than 2 years ago. Yes, I spent a whole 2 years on this game. After graduating from university, I began to think about the possibility of a profitable side job, because, scientists really don't get paid well. Besides, I had always wanted to realize my creative ideas. In short, game development was a perfect fit. However, before fully embarking on my path as a game developer, I wanted to answer the question: can I even develop games, especially on my own? It was precisely to answer this question that I came up with this project. From the beginning, I intended it to be balanced in terms of development difficulty, while specifically covering all aspects of game developing from scratch. So like no purchased assets. In other words, if I was to answer negatively to even one of the questions related to each of the aspects of development, I would tell myself, no, game development is not for me. And because you see this video, it means that I somehow managed to find the way of game development. The following questions help me in this, and maybe they can help you also. Here they are. Game design. Can I refine a game concept? I set myself the task not just to come up with a new game, but to improve an existing concept. In my opinion, this significantly complicates the project from a game design perspective, as the challenge is to retain the existing game core mechanics of the old game, while creating a new one that is more entertaining and feels different. I chose the game 2048. I like playing it a bit, and I remember it from when it was released 10 years ago. However, over all this time, I probably never actually completed it. Every time I reached a significant number and completely lost motivation to continue playing. There is no storyline, the outcome is predictable, there is no progression, and the gameplay is very monotonous. In my game, Recycling 2048, I tried to eliminate the main problem, in my opinion, the punishment for losing. Now, when you are earning coins, regardless of how far you progress each time, you don't feel frustrated, because there is a progression now. Numerous additions make gameplay way less predictable, and presence of story can motivate you to return and play more. At least this is how it works for me. Artwork. I'm not an artist. In biology labs, when we had to draw animals and plants, I always stayed after classes to work on my drawings until they were just acceptable. Moreover, what probably scares me even more is my weak sense of poor composition. Bad color combinations, improper framing, I think sometimes I just can't notice it. However, I believe I managed to find my own style. I tried to using neural network, but they come up with a lot of problems. They don't automatically produce beautiful drawings, you need to know how to guide them in the right direction. Additionally, the issue of copywriting really annoys me. So I only allow myself to use neural network as references, just like photographs and drawings that I found online. So, in the end, I found that neural networks are useless for me. But now I at least know that if I really need to, I can somehow create all the graphics myself. And I hope that each time it will turn out better and better. Story writing and concept development. I've always been drawn to writing stories. During my school years, I drafted a couple of book outlines, and my friends and I played a lot of D&D-like games. Honestly, coming up with the story and describing world came up naturally to me. So, no tips here, sorry. However, I can point out the usefulness of ChatGPT here. English is not my mother tongue, but even in my native language I constantly make a lot of mistakes. Maybe I have some form of dyslexia, who knows, but here ChatGPT works great. It not only allows for easy translation of text, but also serves as an excellent proofreader. My advice is, instead of requesting improve the text, which often adds a lot of unnecessary content, ask it to do proofreading or simply improve the grammar. This avoids copyright issues, the entire written text is still yours. At the same time, it significantly improves the quality of the text, making it easier to read even for yourself. Sound design. I didn't expect how challenging it would be to create various sounds from scratch. However, it is incredibly fun. Sitting in the front of microphone and figuring out how to strike a glass to pitch it into the right sound turn out to be unexpectedly enjoyable. My advice here is simple. Always normalize your sound. In one iteration of the game, I struggled for a long time to adjust all the sounds to a normal volume. It turned out that if you just normalize and maybe limit them, you hardly need to adjust anything else. For sound, by the way, I use Audacity, an open source software. Programming in C#. Here, I allowed myself to fully relax. Half of my variables are deliberately named super funny, and the functions are either extremely large or absurdly one-liners. The most important thing that it all works. Yes, I consider myself more of a programmer, but here I want to address those of you who are afraid of programming. Just don't be afraid. C# in Unity is different from the classic C#. You need to master just a few concepts to confidently write your first game. This includes the use of specified attributes, functions to find a component in a given object or to find an object by name, and the fact that Unity works on ticks. About 30 times in a second, Unity executes the update command in all of the active objects. By the way, I recommend using fixed update more often. It's not linked to the FPS, which will vary from each user, and that's probably all. A fun fact. Some developers will tell you that coroutines are must-have in Unity. But I learned about them at the very end of my project. I replaced only 2 of my custom functions with coroutines to achieve smoother animation. So yes, you can actually manage without them. The most important thing, as with any task, is not to be afraid to try. We all mostly learn from our first project, and I have no doubts that you will code better and better over time. Video editing. This video is about my game. If you are a developer, you'll need videos about your game too. Surprisingly, writing a script and editing video is a separated skill. I will add that there is no need to use paid programs. I've come to love Kdenlive, a free open source video editor. In fact, all the programs that I use in my workflow are free, and almost all of them are open source. This is a principle for me, my rock and roll, rejecting big greedy corporations. And for you, it's a reminder that all you need to start is just time. Bureaucracy. You might be surprised, but you can't just publish a game so easily. At least here, in Germany, you need a lot of paperwork. I'm particularly proud that I managed to handle this as an immigrant with broken German. In short, I spent a significant amount of time, effort and nerves on the registration process. My advice is to familiarize yourself with your local laws before publishing your game. Here, in Germany, you legally can't publish even a non-commercial program without the necessary documents. Unless, of course, you want problems in the future. Release. The project Recycling 2048 perfectly demonstrated 20-80 rule. 80% of the work took only 20% of the time. But those damn 20% without which the game wasn't ready for release, it took like freaking 80%. preparing screenshots, creating a website, setting up Google Play, and editing descriptions, all of this turned out to be a significant part of the work. Also, the final polishing and internal testing, no joke, these take a ton of effort and time. And do I need to mention that you also have to try to promote your game? At least this stage is unnecessary for some of you, and if you are unsure whether you want to publish your game or not, firstly try to make a prototype for your friends and family. Post-release support. It's worth taking in mind that the work doesn't end after the release. At the very least, you need to monitor and swiftly fix critical bugs that player finds. Sometimes Unity or Google Play throws surprises at you, throwing unexpected error that prevents the game from uploading. And it's worth remembering that fixing bugs as an internal product versus a released one is night and day. With an internal product, you simply fix the bug and that's it. But with a released product, you need to be very careful when you intervening the project and code. You need to be sure that you haven't brought new bugs and haven't messed up players' saves and progress. As you can see, the questions and issues listed are not solo specific. I would advise a novice team to address the same questions and problems. Essentially, these are just the basic aspects of game development applicable to any gaming project. The list can certainly be expanded, such as with 3D design, team management, etc. In addition, I also followed certain principles during development. It was important for me to create a unique, complete game. One that I wouldn't be ashamed to show to others. I also wanted to make a potentially commercially successful game. Of course, thinking about serious success is probably crazy, as it could easily lead to a disappointment and burnout. But if you don't build monetization into your game, then, in case of success, you won't make any money, right? The commercial model heavily depends on the platform. If the game is planned to be sold through Steam, then the obvious model is buy to download. In other words, players just buy the game. For Google Play or the mobile market in general, the ad-supported model is more common. In simple terms, it's a free game with ads. Each of the financial models imposes its own restrictions on the final product. So, for example, a ridiculously simple model for Steam has its pitfalls. You must consider the refund and make sure your game provides a minimum of 2+ hours of good content. For ad-supported mobile games, there are 3 types of advertisements. Banners, the cheapest from ads, regular ads, which simply pop up at random moment, and reward ads, perhaps the best type of advertisements for both developers and players. Reward ads pay the most. The player must voluntarily click a button and watch a minute of advertisement. Typically, players click this button to receive in-game bonuses, in the case of my game to double up the run points. However, it also serves as a way for players to directly support us, the developers. This way, some players express their gratitude for the game. Integrating reward ads into my game actually defined a significant part of the design. As strange as it may sound, I decided to plan the entire game around ad viewing button. I started by planning the ads to integrate them as seamlessly as possible and remove player annoyance. Studying the experience of other game devs, I found one typical mistake of game design. Attempting to insert ads as an end stage. Nobody will watch them or they will feel completely out of place. From the decision to build the game around reward ads, the idea of doubling points and various upgrades was born. Add here the need to increase replayability and add story, and voila, the design is ready. About languages. Initially, I had the idea to make the game completely without words, using only icons, images, and animations. While such an approach is feasible, it significantly limits the range of possible games, which I didn't like. Since the main difficulty with languages is mostly related to programming, I decided to implement one of my prepared ideas of how to organize translations into all languages with community involvement. Overall, my solution doesn't differ much from the standard one presented in Unity guides. For each text, we add a script in which we specify an ID, then the script replaces the text with the necessary one. I won't go to the details now, I am still refining the entire pipeline, which I will share later. However, as a result, I published tables to improve translation on GitHub and wrote this instruction for translators. I hope it's clear and not too complicated. What I have learned from myself during the development of this game. The main thing, I became a game developer. Now I have all the documents, skills, and I figure out how to work most efficiently alone. I realized that if you can break down a big tasks into small ones, you can move mountains. This is probably the main skill needed for development. Also, I felt how much tiredness from a project depends more on the time from the start, rather than on the time you actually spend it. So, if you have problems with focus and persistence, my advice would be to finish the game in about 2 months. And for that, you need to plan it very small. Because during the process, the project itself will inevitably expand, improving this, adding that, and all the allocated time will fly without notice. I would say that any time estimation for the first project you can simply multiply by 2 or even 10. And think twice, do you really need the commercial aspect? It will be much easier to create a prototype and let all of your relatives and friends play it. You will be able to explain all of the features to them in person, warn about bugs, and you can avoid spending 80% of the time to polish the last 20% of the game. This way you will understand whether this is for you or not, and whether the game development should remain a hobby or become a job. For me personally, it was challenging to balance game development with a full-time job. Finding time for this project was tough for me. I had like one weekend every 2 months. With this schedule, I kept forgetting all the details and ended up spending half of my precious time just refreshing my memory of what I was doing. Another challenge was that my full-time job was also mentally draining. Being a developer during the day leaves me with no energy to code at the night. That's why I personally like to relax in the evenings with some handicraft, and on weekends I'd rather go hiking. Overwhelming your brain, at least for me, is very counterproductive. I always ended up feeling squeezed like a lemon and not efficient at all. And the most depressing feeling is when you feel how much effort you are putting into it compared to how simple the game is in the end. However, I want to mention that this game has already brought me some significant success. Thanks to it, I was able to get a job as a C++ programmer and work for a year, even though I had no prior knowledge of C family languages. So, regardless of why you want to make a game, just start, even with something small. What you will learn will definitely come in handy in future, and perhaps, like me, you will be able to start fulfilling your dreams with your own hands. The Polar Citizen out, and as always, stay strong.